You burned a little girl alive.
I only do what my lord commands.
He commands you to burn children. Your lord is evil.
Hello, my sweet summer children. I'm back with some juice to get you through the long night. I want to talk about prophecy. I want to look at prophecy in a different light, under different pretenses. Normally, because we are humans, we have favorite characters and we try to fit our favorite characters into prophecy and make them more heroic or more important. I'm guilty of this on occasion, but I've been trying to take steps into being less biased for Arya and Jaime, or less influenced by how I want or think something should be. And I'm doing that just by examining certain aspects of things. So for this video, we are going to be discussing prophecy. We are going to put prophecy in perspective. Game of Thrones, the TV show, is a book adaptation of a book series, A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. And this series isn't complete, so a lot of times we combine the books and the show and we try to find out what's really going on by reaching some middle ground. So let's look at what George R.R. Martin says about prophecy. Prophecies are, a double-edged sword. You have to handle them very carefully. I mean, they can add depth and interest to a book, but you don't want to be too literal or too easy.
Prophecies are dangerous things.
We also have some quotes from the books that show us that we shouldn't trust prophecy. Gorgon of Old Geese once wrote that a prophecy is like a treacherous woman. She takes your member in her mouth and you moan with the pleasure of it and think, how sweet, how fine, how good this is. And then her teeth snap shut and your moans turn to screams. That is the nature of prophecy, said Gorgon. Prophecy will bite your prick off every time. That quote is from Marwyn the Mage. This quote is from Tyrion. Prophecy is like a half-trained mule. It looks as though it might be useful, but the moment you trust in it, it kicks you in the head. So let me tell you why these two quotes are important. They are important because they are both the same in nature. They have the same meaning, and they are coming from two of the most learned men in the story. We don't know much about Marwyn the Mage, but we know enough. He's an archmaester at the Citadel that's traveled much of Essos, and he's even been to Asshai. So Tyrion is also very well educated as well. His mind needs books as a sword needs a whetstone. So it's most likely that their interpretation of prophecy is the accurate interpretation of prophecy. Prophecy is tricky business, said George R.R. Martin. So going forward in this video, I'm going to look at prophecy from a different position than I always have. But before we can go forward, we must go back. We must go back to George before he wrote A Song of Ice and Fire. In 1988, the first book in the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series came out, The Dragonbone Chair. If you're one of my day ones, then you know where this is going. I've been telling y'all to read MS&T for over a year. So George openly says that he was influenced by Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. He says it's one of his favorite fantasy books. And George's words grace the new covers, or the updated covers, of the Dragonbone Chair. Which brings me to the thing that I talked about a long time ago. The similarities between Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and A Song of Ice and Fire. By no means are they the same, or am I implying that George R.R. Martin ripped off Tad Williams? I'm not implying that. What I'm saying is the influence is noticeable, similar to how the influence of The Lord of the Rings is noticeable in the story. But I think the MS&T influence is way more prevalent than the Lord of the Rings influence in the story at this point. You know what? I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the parallels between Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and A Song of Ice and Fire. I'll link the full articles below on all of the comparisons because these people came up with way more than I had even thought of. So warning, MS&T spoilers are coming. So there's a highborn girl that disguises herself as a boy and learns to fight with a sword as she travels throughout the lands. She travels from one end of the world to the other, fleeing danger everywhere. There's two princely brothers who hate each other and fight over the royal throne. The country is torn apart as various factions choose sides. There's a red-robed advisor to the new king that convinces the king that he needs to sacrifice his hated younger brother. There's a comet that appears in the sky, portending doom and change. Strange, otherworldly creatures who live in the far north appear, and although they have been inactive for centuries, they plot to take over the world. It is foretold of the coming of an unusual winter, which will last a very long time. At the same time as the otherworldly invasion, only the Northerners take these old legends seriously. Everyone else laughs at such absurd tales, but the people of the North never forgot. A very unusual throne lies at the center of the human dispute for the kingdom, but is only a distraction for the real conflict. A major noble character, a close relative to the king, loses his hand. A wolf character plays a major role. The children of the dawn, who once lived throughout the realm but who are now living in hiding, will have a part to play. They appear to be at odds with the other unworldly creatures in the far north. White Walkers, children of the forest, much. I mean, come on. There are so many similarities. If I went through all of them, I mean, can you not already see the influence? The influence is there and it's heavy. But the main thing that made me bring up Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn today was prophecy. So in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, prophecy is a big part of the plot. There's a war and politics going on and all that, but there's a big bad, the Storm King. Listen to the backstory of the Storm King with Game of Thrones in mind and watch the plugs that I plug on screen. I'm going to read a summary from the MS&T wiki because it's just easier that way, and I'll link everything in the description box if you want to check out the wiki. The Storm King was said to be the brightest flame that the Sith had ever known, and had the depredations of humanity not come to Aston Ard, he might well have led them out of their exile to a new golden age. Unfortunately, his power and ambition turned to defending his people against the onslaught of the Black Rimmersmen, and he went down dark paths in search of forbidden knowledge, which eventually led him to forge in secret the dread sword Sorrow, devourer of light and hope. He sought to destroy the armies invading his home with a mighty spell, but instead cast himself and his servants into the realms beyond death, where his spirit burned for 5 centuries in search of a way back. He is the devil of Aston Ard, a being of fire and ice, who seeks nothing less than total destruction of all mortals and the consumption of the world by unbeing. Does he not sound like Azor Ahai? And does he not kind of sound like the Night King? Well, the main plot in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn is centralized around this poem or prophecy from a mythical book. So the main characters are trying to basically follow this prophecy and make this prophecy come true and do as this prophecy says. But if they do that, that is exactly what the Storm King wants them to do. If they follow the prophecy, then the Storm King gets exactly what he wants. He wins. The prophecy is a false messenger. So knowing that George R.R. Martin was inspired by this series, that caused me to take a second look at the Azor Ahai prophecy. And let me just say, Westeros might already be doomed and nothing can stop it. But let's go. So we hear about the Azor Ahai prophecy. It seems very central to the plot at this point, but what if everyone that's ever thought of a prince that was promised and a Lightbringer and an Azor Ahai was wrong? Who the even wrote this prophecy, and why should we even give a about it? What if this prophecy is like a recipe for disaster? Like if you do all these things, the world will end, like a recipe for doom. What if Westeros has been doomed ever since Daenerys woke those dragons from stone? So let's talk about this. The legend of Azor Ahai is not a Westerosi legend. It actually comes from the ancient books of Ashai. The religion of R'hllor preached that this warrior shall be Azor Ahai. R'hllor, or the Lord of Light, is also not a Westerosi religion. It originated in Essos. We are supposed to believe that the mad genius, the RR, really is writing this basic, eternal, dualistic battle between God of fire and light, R'hllor, and a God of ice and darkness, the Great Other. On the surface, that is what it looks like. It looks like an eternal battle between good and evil, but we know that's not George. We know our author doesn't write like that. And there are quotes that show in the books that ice and fire are not at all in battle. They are the same. So the Crannogmen know more truth than most anyone in this story. And this quote from Meera explains ice and fire as one. I hate these stupid mountains of yours, Prince Bran. Yesterday you said you loved them. Oh, I do. My Lord Father told me about mountains, but I never saw one until now. I love them more than I can say. Bran made a face at her. But you just said you hated them. Why can't it be both? Meera reached up and pinched his nose. Because they're different, he insisted. Like night and day or ice and fire. If ice can burn, said Jojen in his solemn voice, then love and hate can mate. Mountains are marsh, it makes no matter. The land is one. So what if R'hllor and the Great Other are the same? You might be asking yourself how that would even be possible or what evidence supports this. And I'm going to reveal everything in part 2. But while you're waiting for part 2, if this is true, what does this mean going forward? What damage could have already been done because of this? As always, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone that supports me on Patreon. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please click that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and join the Sweet Summer family. Okay, my sweet summer children, have a good day.
Shame.